Welcome to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl. Today we're talking about Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. We've made it to book 5, which means we will be able to finally make some of the ring cycle connections. First, the quick little review. If you haven't ever read these books, I know that there are a lot of people who I have talked to who have said that book 5, they didn't like it. It was too depressing. But I actually find so much good in this book, and I love this book. It is one of my favorites. I think I like it so much because it makes me feel so much. It does bring up emotions, especially the first time I read it when I didn't know what was going to happen. With the introduction of the character Dolores Umbridge, it brought me one of my most hated fictional characters ever. I love it when an author can make me feel that much emotion about fictional characters. So I feel like this story is extremely important to the greater whole of the story, but it also is the story where what has happened in the first 4 books really is put into place now. The story is going, it is moving. We are on the road now to that finale. So I would really stress to keep going. There's more to it, again, as usual, than what you think. So I'm going to go right into my introduction of this, and then it will start to get spoilery. There is significance in the title of this book. We find out that Dumbledore's army is called the Order of the Phoenix. And remember that the phoenix is sometimes called a resurrection bird and is also a symbol of Christ. So in taking this name on, this group is symbolically taking on the name of Christ in their pursuit against evil. So as usual, we're going to visit alchemy, because we've done this with every book since it's such a huge part of the series. In Looking for God in Harry Potter, John Granger says, "The beginning of spiritual realization is always accompanied by some kind of sacrifice or death, a dying to the old state of things, in order to make way for the new insight and creation. Order of the Phoenix is Harry's dark night of the soul, in which everything in his world is either turned on its head or taken from him. Harry is a shattered person." And we see this in the book. This quote is from the book. "Harry could not stand this. He could not stand being Harry anymore. He had never felt more trapped inside his own head and body, never wished so intensely that he could be anybody else." And as I said in Unit 1, and I think I've said it since then, alchemy is about taking that base metal and turning it into gold. It is taking the base fallen person and turning them into spiritual gold. It would be easier for Harry in this book, at this point in his story and life, to just pretend he doesn't know what he knows and to go with the popular narrative. But he can't. And this creates so much havoc and turmoil and that dark night of the soul for him. We are in the black stage of the alchemical process. Book 5 is the black book. The 5th stage of the alchemical process is called putrefaction or fermentation. And this is considered by far to be the longest and most difficult phase of the alchemical process. It is a time when you must let all of the dross drop away, and it is known as the dark night of the soul. It is the decay of one's old self and the rebirth of one's true self. It is the phoenix being burned into the ashes. The black stage is fire. We get this imagery throughout the whole book, even from the very beginning, with how hot and dry England is. They're going through a drought and a heat spell. Angelina Stanford showed us that there is an image that is connected to this stage of alchemy. And I'm going to show my paper here. You can see it's an eagle with a snake, and then there is a toad at the bottom of the picture. Historically, toads were thought to be venomous. In George Ripley's short poem, The Vision, he described an alchemical process in symbolism. The toad drank the juice of grapes until it was so filled that it casts its venom and begins to swell as a result of poisoning. The toad then died in a cave. The color sequence of the toad was black, white, and then red, which are the last 3 stages of the alchemical process. And thus the venom is changed into powerful medicine. We are going to meet Dolores Umbridge in this book. Hopefully, by this point in this video, you have read this before, and you will know that she is described as looking like a toad. If we use this historical symbolism for when we think of Umbridge, we can make the connections. She is full of poison. She spews it on those around her. She is puffed up in her own pride. And while she doesn't become good, her venom does good work in Harry, because the bad things that happen to Harry are used for good. She wants to destroy him, but he will use this as a catalyst for becoming who he is meant to be. I've talked about these books being like a medieval romance. When you look at the different literary devices, there is also the anti-romance. When an anti-romance moves in the direction of comedy, it becomes a satire like Gulliver's Travels. When it moves in the direction of a tragedy, it becomes irony like The Great Gatsby or Animal Farm. The anti-romance is playing against the romance structure. It wants you to believe you are not on a quest. There are no such thing as dragons. And if we look back at I think I talked about it in the first book, about the masks that are used for drama, and they're usually the tragedy and the comedy. But if we're looking at romance and comedy, you have a divine perspective. You are up above looking down and seeing the whole story. You see things as they really are, the spiritual things, that we're all on the journey with the soul. With tragedy, the perspective is from below. We're looking up. For example, if a knight slays a dragon, the romance is seen from the knight's perspective, and the tragedy would be seen from the perspective of the dragon. It's the same story, we just turn the model. When you follow the fall of the dragon, you are falling with the dragon, like in Macbeth. If you read that and you asked yourself, what if I threw away everything to get a kingdom? You follow through with him and see what would happen. You would most likely come to the conclusion that you would not want to do what he did. And so it can help us to notice those things in ourselves that are the smaller version of whatever is happening in the book. And when we are able to watch a character make the decisions, we can feel it in our soul, not just our head. And it helps us to understand ourselves and to see where bad decisions can lead. The anti-romance leaning into the ironic has the human horizontal perspective. If written well, the character never really even understands the significance in their life, but we, the reader, do. The other way to look at this model is to turn it upside down and call it a parody. There are many things today that are called a parody that aren't the original definition. So when we read a true parody the way it was when they started, we tend to think that the author was on drugs or hallucinating, like I did the very first time I read Alice in Wonderland, which is a classic parody. Another classic upside down story is Robin Hood. If we were looking at it with a modern lens, we might say, well, he's the bad guy because he's stealing. All the good guys are outlaws and the bad guys are the good guys. This is upside down. When everything in the world that you're reading seems wrong, that's probably because it is. If the world is turned upside down and we want to make it right, then we have to turn it upside down again. With these upside down stories, there usually is a descent and then an ascent. And those are very symbolic of what is happening in the story. The ascent will usually have everything that the descent had in reverse. We'll have an imprisonment and then we'll have an escape. The chosen one's identity is revealed. The enchantment is broken. There is often a tragic death. When you have a book that descends into a nightmare world, often we will call it now a dystopian. Book 5 of Harry Potter delves into not only this upside down imagery of an upside down world, a parody, but also a dystopian. Dystopia is Greek for bad place. Dystopian stories are ones where the leaders implement what they imagine heaven on earth would be, but it instead is a hell on earth. It never works out the way they expect it to or want it to, or at least the way they pretend they wanted it to. They will sell it as a dream, but it's actually a nightmare. The opposite is utopia, which is Greek for no place because it doesn't exist. We can imagine a utopia, but in our fallen world, it can't be real. So there are two types of dystopian societies in story. We get the educational dystopian and the political dystopian. The education one is where the ministry or the teachers, the school, will tell you what you need to know. In the political dystopian, it's the government. We see both of these in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. In this book, Harry tells the other students that they need to practice their skills in class because they will need them in their lives. But Umbridge says, no, you only need to learn what you need to pass the test. Read the textbook we provide. No talking, no wands. We decide what is appropriate for you to learn. We see in the political side, in 1984, we see the news used as propaganda. And there is constant spying, and there is even a group of children used to spy on people, the junior spies. And again, this we see in this book as well. We see that the Daily Prophet is used for the ministry's propaganda. They outlaw the other non-government controlled news, the Quibbler and others, and much emphasis is put on being ministry-backed. No right or truth-backed, ministry-backed. Umbridge has the Inquisitorial Squad, which is a group of students who will spy for her, and she delights in giving herself more and more power. Everything is wrong. Again, this is an upside-down world, this dystopian world. Everything is wrong. The bad guys are in charge. The good guys are the ones breaking the law or breaking the rules. So this book is 100% an upside down book. He had begun his descent at the end of the 4th book. While you're reading it, you want to look for that kind of imagery. You'll start to notice it right away. We have Petunia knowing about what Dementors are. Luna Lovegood is reading the Quibbler upside down when we see her on the train. The Quibbler, which is like the gossip magazine, is the one that is going to tell the truth first. Ron becomes prefect. Harry is thrown off the Quidditch team. Ron wins the Quidditch game. Harry is given detention for telling the truth and must write, I must not tell lies. Dumbledore is absent from Harry. He's not giving him the normal support that he usually gives. And we even see McGonagall help Peeves in his mischief. When I say that Alice in Wonderland was a classic parody, the true parody was more of an Eastern tradition, and Lewis Carroll wanted to create that. So Alice is perfect parody styled in the Eastern tradition. She falls down a rabbit hole, and then the world is upside down. A lot of times in these parodies, we will see imagery of clocks and mirrors, both things that show up in Alice's stories. And if you read this book with this in mind, you will see Alice imagery. From the beginning, you have Harry rushing to a trial that he's going to be late for. His trial is very similar to Alice's trial in the book, where the punishment is decided before the trial even happens. And now we need an Alice figure. So do we have an Alice figure in these books? Alice is petite, blonde, intelligent, curious. We have Luna Lovegood. We first meet Luna in this book when she is reading the Quibbler upside down. She is in blue as part of Ravenclaw. And J.K. Rowling has said this about Luna. Luna is the kind of person to believe 10 impossible things before breakfast, which is an allusion to a part of Alice in Wonderland. As we have a parody, this is a parody book, we also have a parody version of Alice in Umbridge. Umbridge, in the US version, it says she wears a headband, but in the UK version, it's Alice band. She has a little girl voice, likes to have tea, has cats all over her walls. She is the parody of Alice. She thinks she's Alice. She believes herself to be reasonable, and she will force the world around her to match her reason. Really, she is like the Red Queen, unbridled passion and fury. So let's bring these back together. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is an upside-down book, a parody with Alice elements, a dystopia, a nightmare book that is the descent of Harry's story. These books are known for dreams. What is a dream? What is real? And Harry is continually having dreams throughout this book, and he is often wondering which ones are real and which are not. He can't tell the difference. There's also a lot of underwater imagery. In book 4, we begin Descent. We had an underwater task, the egg underwater, and even Voldemort's parody baptism. But in this book, we have them walking through glass to get to St. Mungo's at Christmas time, and he says it feels like walking through water. One way to get out of this upside-down world is to understand the ridiculousness of it, to understand what is happening. This can show up in laughter. Finally, at the end of the book, we will have our ascent. Harry is lifted at the end. Just as in the beginning, he goes down into the ministry, at the end, when all has been revealed and the world is finally going to go back to what it's supposed to be, he goes back out of the ministry. From here, things will begin to turn around. There will still be evil to conquer, but now the truth is known. So let's go into some of the chapters. In chapter 1, we have Dudley Demented. We begin the book, as usual, on Privet Drive, the pattern that we only saw changed in the last book so far. And it is hot and dry, like I said. There is a drought and a heat wave going on. Harry is being sneaky to listen to the news through the window because his aunt and uncle think it's weird that he wants to know what's going on. Harry hears a loud crack and he hurts himself by jumping up. So then he ends up having to leave and go to the park where we see Dudley, we see him and his friends, and we find out that he and his friends are the bullies, as we would expect, and that they've been doing that all summer. This gets us to a point where Harry and Dudley are, of course, walking home together, and the Dementors show up. And this leads to what I was talking about. Petunia knows what the Dementors are. And of course, they think that it's something that Harry is causing, that he is the problem, that he is the reason that their son has gone through this ordeal. Now we start to see the real dangers of what is happening in this book. If he gets expelled, if he gets his wand taken away. But we have the advance guard show up for him. We meet Nymphadora Tonks for the first time in chapter 3, the advance guard, and they take him to Grimmauld Place. In chapter 4, we arrive there. Grimmauld Place is a grim old place. Harry is finally reunited with everyone that he has wanted to talk to besides Dumbledore. He begins losing his temper a lot with his friends. This is something I think a lot of people take issue with, but when I first heard people saying that they didn't like how he was acting at the beginning, for me, it wasn't weird. I thought, if you've just been through at his age, everything he just went through in the last book and leading up to this moment, it would be really hard to not be acting out the way he is, to want to know the truth and be mad that people aren't giving it to you. So we find out that this is the headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix. John Granger says, the word order is a religious term referring to a group with a specific vocation within the church. That this order is of the Phoenix, a traditional symbol both of the end of alchemy and of Christ himself. This highlights the otherworldly meaning. We see as we are going through his experience at Grimmauld Place that Harry wants to know more. Sirius wants him to be able to know more and to join the order, but Molly is really the driving force in trying to keep the kids from being involved. And as a mom, you can understand that. But I found as a reader, I also was frustrated thinking, okay, we've all seen what Harry has been through, what he is capable of. And we also know that this is not a safe time to be keeping this from the children. So I could see both sides there. We spend a lot of time at Grimmel Place. We watch them cleaning this house out, trying to get rid of all of the dark arts items that are left behind by Sirius's family. And we're really starting to see what his family was really like, including seeing the Black family tapestry and finding out that Sirius is related to the Weasleys and Tonks and also the Malfoys and the Lestranges. We also get a little Easter egg when they're cleaning for a later book when they find a locket. Chapter 7 gives us the most comprehensive look at the Ministry of Magic that we will get as he is going through the ministry with Arthur, and we are hearing what the different departments are. The phone number that they dial into the telephone to enter the ministry is 62442, which if you were on one of the old-fashioned phones, it spells out magic. And of course, we see how Arthur and Kingsley pretend like they're not really close. And the time is changed for the hearing. They are trying to have this stacked against him from the beginning. In chapter 8, we get the hearing. I love it when Albus Dumbledore says, "Oh, I don't think any of us believe the Dementors were there by coincidence." We see Dolores Umbridge make a small movement at that moment. And of course, we're going to learn later in the book that she is the one who sent them. So she's reacting to him saying that, probably wondering, does he know it's me? Which might be one of the reasons that she works so hard to discredit him. So this is the first time we meet Dolores Jane Umbridge, senior undersecretary to the minister for now. We also see Percy, and we're getting the picture that Percy is not on Harry's side, which will of course show up throughout this book. When I talk about how I can see Molly's perspective of not wanting the kids involved, in chapter 9, she has the boggart showing her all of her family members as if they have died. And I think that really gets to the root of the fear of all mothers, something happening to your children and your husband, and really to all humans, where we're worried about something happening to those we love. And that really gets you to understand why she is being so cautious with the situation, why she doesn't want the children involved. We also find out that Hermione and Ron have been made prefects. And I think we get another one of those funny lines in this book. Mrs. Weasley says, "I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Oh, Ron, how wonderful, a prefect. That's everyone in the family." And then George says, "What are Fred and I, next door neighbors?" And she just ignores it. She just moves on. She doesn't stop to apologize. Business as usual. Being made a prefect is kind of like a litmus test for your soul. What are you going to do with that little bit of power? We see that Draco, for example, will take advantage of it and use it to please himself rather than to do what's right and fair. Hermione will use it for what is right. And in fact, when there are things that she doesn't like, she'll still say, well, I can't do anything about that. It's not against the rules, but I don't like it. But she'll stop things that she thinks are wrong and are breaking rules. Ron is tempted to use the power. And so you see that that's showing what they'll do with a little bit of power. Then we see somebody like Umbridge. Whenever someone says that they aren't breaking a rule, she makes a new rule. She's the opposite of Hermione here. So in chapter 10, it's finally September, and we are going back to Hogwarts. And again, this is when we meet Luna Lovegood. When they get to Hogwarts and Harry realizes for the first time that the carriages are not horseless, we'll find out about Thestrals later on. But for now, we know that Luna also can see them. When she says, don't worry, you're just as sane as I am. This isn't comforting to Harry, but it's also another little nod to the Cheshire Cat when he says, we're all a little mad here. They're saying a different thing, but they're similar sounding phrases. In chapter 11, The Sorting Hat's New Song, we get Dolores Umbridge. She gets up and gives her speech. And of course, Hermione is the one who reads between the lines of the speech and sees what the teachers, but not the other students, are noticing. And she says, it means the ministry is interfering at Hogwarts. We also find out that Seamus is not necessarily on Harry's side either. His world is continuing to get more upside down. When Umbridge shows up to teach her first class, we find out that there is the idea of the ministry-approved curriculum. It seems like the professors before this have always just taught whatever they want to teach. So what is the curriculum supposed to be? When she responds to Hermione about the experts, you have to ask, what experts? But of course, that is what a lot of people do. When they're making a point and they want you to believe them and it's not a true thing, they'll say, oh, studies show, or the experts say, and they don't often have the studies or the experts to back it up. Hermione is probably more qualified than those in the ministry at deciding this. We see throughout the book that Harry is more qualified at teaching than the expert that they have sent. And this is something we see in our world all the time. If you have an opinion on something and you don't have a PhD at the end of your name or a degree in something, a lot of people will completely dismiss you. And yet I have found that sometimes the experts may know more in a certain area, but it's not always the case. You can learn a lot through self-study and research. That's been something I've noticed in our homeschool, is that when we're learning about something, we can learn about both sides of an issue instead of somebody telling us which side is the right side and which one to teach. And then that way we can look at all the studies and really look at everything more critically rather than just being told what to learn, what to believe. We see Hermione reads the Daily Prophet every day, even though we know at this point that it's propaganda. But she, when asked why, she says it's best to know what the enemy is saying. And I think she has the right idea. It's never smart to only listen to one side or let others tell you what not to read, watch, or listen to. This is usually only done by someone who has something to hide. If someone tells you, don't read that, don't watch that, this person is only telling lies, you need to find that out for yourself. Because if they are telling you what you shouldn't be listening to or reading, they are operating like a cult. Hermione is preparing herself. She'll know what they're up against. Ignorance is of the other side is never going to help you. One of my favorite moments is when Harry defies Umbridge and McGonagall tells him not to, but then she offers him a biscuit instead of punishment. In chapter 13, Detention with Dolores, we find out that Dolores Umbridge is not just annoying and infuriating, but she is actually evil. This detention scene is reminiscent of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. Faustus cuts his arm in order to write with his own blood on a deed that is promising his soul to the devil. And we see her, this evil character, using that kind of imagery for Harry. We also get Hermione's perspective, telling Harry, you know, this is what it looked like for the onlookers. We didn't see what you guys went through. All we see is you show up with Cedric, so that maybe he can also understand a little bit of why some people are not wanting to believe his story. In chapter 14, Ron gets a letter from Percy telling him he would be better off cutting ties with Harry, which lets us know that Percy has decided the experts are more important than his family. We also see in chapter 15, the Hogwarts High Inquisitor, when Umbridge is made High Inquisitor, we see how things usually work. As soon as someone stands up against something that is wrong, especially a group of people, they try to discredit the person. So the Daily Prophet reports Griselda Marchbanks and Tiberius Ogden have resigned in protest and says, for a full account of Madame Marchbanks' alleged links to subversive goblin groups, turn to page 17. So we see that as soon as they're saying, well, she doesn't like what's going on here and has resigned from this group, so we're going to point you to something about an alleged thing she might have done. In chapter 16, in the Hog's Head, we also see that the kids have something to learn because they go in there to have the secret meeting and we see two people in disguises. As you read, you want to warn the kids, don't be so obvious and pay attention. If there's people in disguises, you might want to make sure they're not somebody that you don't want listening. They might be spying on you. And it turned out both of them were. As Umbridge reveals later, this was her informant about the meeting, Willie Wittershins, who used this information that he passes on to her as a way to get out of a punishment for the regurgitating toilets. And then Sirius reveals later that the other one in disguise was Mundungus. The High Inquisitor orders all student organizations, societies, teams, groups, and clubs to be disbanded after finding out this information. So they have to work really hard to figure out how are they going to keep up their little society and learn how to do Defense Against the Dark Arts. But they figure it out. And Ginny comes up with the idea of naming it Dumbledore's Army because that is what the Ministry's worst fear, isn't it? She said. The DA has their first meeting. Dobby leads them to the Room of Requirement, and it's the perfect place for them to hold meetings. It offers them everything they need, and we start to see Harry just coming into his own teaching these other kids. But we also see that everyman journey idea again, where they are learning the things that they will later need in the book. In chapter 21, we see Thestrals, and Harry finds out he's not crazy, that there really is a reason that he can see them. And then in chapter 22, we go to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, because, as we've seen in the last chapter, Arthur has been injured. There is a quote from Sirius in this chapter. Your father knew what he was getting into, and he won't thank you for messing things up for the Order. This is how it is. This is why you're not in the Order. You don't understand. There are things worth dying for. This is a quote to remember later because Sirius was willing to die. After finding out that Harry has had this dream that he thought was a dream where he's seeing Arthur, seeing the Ministry and seeing what happened to Arthur, Dumbledore makes it clear that he wants him to take occlumency classes from Snape. But this is not going to go very well. And so we get to see the back and forth with Snape. And this is used as a tool by Rowling to give us some information about Snape that we wouldn't otherwise have throughout the book. We also finally get the moment where Harry opens up to Rita Skeeter to give her the full story, and it's published in the Quibbler. And of course, everyone is reading it, and Harry begins to get letters of apology and support because people read this and they believe it, even though it's in the Quibbler. And of course, this leads to Umbridge banning it. Again, the liars are the ones who want to keep you quiet. They want to shut you up. They don't want anyone to know the truth. They want you to only know what they tell you so that you don't find out that they are lying. But it doesn't work because everyone's reading it anyway. We have the sneak, the girl who goes and gets Umbridge, and they come and they find the room of the requirement. The DA is disbanded, and they are taken to Dumbledore's office, where Dumbledore will pretend it was his idea because he knows what will happen to the students if they are punished for it, whereas he also can get away. Umbridge becomes the new head of Hogwarts, but the office won't let her in. The students begin to rebel, and this is another reason this book is upside down. The students are rebelling and the teachers are not doing anything about it. They don't care. They're glad that they are rebelling. And then we have Harry seeing Snape's memory and realize that Snape's anger towards James Potter isn't completely unfounded. He may be every bit as arrogant as Snape has always said he is. Harry never thought he would feel sorry for Snape, and now he feels all upside down about his dad. He is seeing things with a different perspective. This is one of the things I've alluded to in earlier videos, that we know that James Potter is not who we expect him to be, because we also learn with Harry about who his father was and what he did to Snape that wasn't okay. So there must have been something that we never fully get in these books that tells us how he changed. I would love to get that story, to see his redemption arc, to see how James became who he later became. In chapter 29, there is career advice, and Harry mentions wanting to be an Auror. And of course, Umbridge says there's no way you will ever do that. And so McGonagall says that she will do anything to help him to become an Auror. We have found out about what Hagrid was doing since the last book, and we learn about his half-brother Grop. I am not a huge fan of Grop or that whole storyline with Hagrid being, beaten up all the time, bloody, always having injuries from Grop. But I also understand how this will come into the story in other ways later, but it's not my favorite part. So I would love to know if any of you are a huge fan of Grop, if you like that part of the story. But because of going to meet him, then Harry and Hermione miss Ron winning the Quidditch game, which is so sad. There is so much going on in this book because there's all of this, the main story, but then there's also the OWL exams that they are preparing for. And it just seems like there's just so many things happening all at once. While they're taking their astronomy exam, they see Hagrid attacked. McGonagall is injured. And then in one of their other exams, Harry has another vision, another dream vision. And in this one, he sees Sirius being tortured in the place that he has been dreaming of. It feels like the dream he had about Arthur, so he believes it is real. Thankfully, Harry agrees to try to talk to Sirius first. It's so unfortunate that he forgets all about that mirror. That part, every time I read these books, it makes me so frustrated that he forgets about that little mirror that he has, that Sirius gave him, and that Sirius didn't use it up to this point, that he didn't remind him at some point in any of their conversations about the mirror and that they could communicate that way. But instead, we get him going to the fire and communicating with Creature. And this is some foreshadowing because Creature's hands are bandaged. And we know how Dobby acted when he was going against what his masters told him to do and was leaving to go warn somebody. The kids are caught by Umbridge and the Inquisitorial Squad, and they only get out of it because of Hermione's smart idea, which of course leads them to the forest where Umbridge is taken away, and the kids run back to figure out a way to get to the Department of Mysteries to try to save Sirius. They ride the Thestrals. I could go on for probably too long about all of the different rooms that we get to be introduced to at the Department of Mysteries and the different symbology you'll see. When you're reading it, look for things like that. You see clocks. I've talked about those being a symbol in upside down imagery, upside down stories, but you'll start to see all of those kind of things. And it's just such an interesting part of the story to get to know all of these different departments and what is in them. In chapter 35, Beyond the Veil, this is a reference not only to the veil in the temple of the Old Testament that ripped in two upon Jesus's death, symbolizing that we no longer had to go through someone else to reach him, but also to the shack in C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle. J.K. Rowling herself has said that writing this chapter made her cry. Everyone spends this chapter fighting, and at the end, only Neville and Harry are left standing when help shows up. We feel hope, but then death comes. In chapter 36, we see Harry pursuing Bellatrix, and learn that he is incapable of the unforgivable curse, which is something I've talked about earlier. You have to have the heart stance to be able to do these curses, not just the words. Fudge and the other ministry members finally witness Voldemort's return, and so Dumbledore will be reinstated as headmaster. The world will go back to rights because they now cannot deny the truth any longer. During this part of the battle, we see Voldemort cannot fully possess Harry because of the love in his heart. We see Dumbledore say that Voldemort's death would not satisfy him, and Voldemort saying, there is nothing worse than death. And Dumbledore tells him that he is wrong, and that this opinion is his greatest weakness. Fawkes shows up again in a moment where he is needed, and he gets in the way of the curse and takes it for Dumbledore. What defeats death? A sacrificial death. The message here is death is only temporary. It is not the end of the story. Fawkes will be born again. Harry is taken up out of the ministry, and we begin the ascent to leave this descent world that they've been in. Harry arrives in Dumbledore's office and waits for him there. Dumbledore tells him everything. We have the usual sit-down talk with them, and he finally learns what the prophecy is, why he must return to the Dursleys' house every year, why Voldemort marked him as the equal, how it easily could have been Neville, and that either Harry or Voldemort must die. Dumbledore also admits here to Harry that he has let his emotions blur his judgment with him. And in chapter 38, we get the Second War beginning. Harry is understandably melancholy at the end of the book. He's dealing with a lot of emotions with what has happened, but also with Sirius's death and the revelations that he has learned about being the chosen one. This is when he remembers that mirror. There's a level of vindication that everyone now knows he was telling the truth. Students who all year have believed he was a liar are now showing him admiration, but it's little consolation for Harry because of what he is feeling and going through. Harry thinks suddenly of Sir Nicholas and rushes to him to find out if Sirius might be a ghost. And of course, Sir Nicholas tells him, no, this is a decision you have to make, and Sirius would not have chosen this. But after this encounter, he meets up with Luna. He finds out from her why she can see the Thestrals, that she saw her mom die. She says, it's not as though I'll never see Mom again, is it? He questions her on this, and she reminds him of what they heard at the Vel. This is the moment he needed. He needed someone who understood him and could remind him of what he had seen and heard. The journey of the soul is getting to the answer of to this question. It is not the end. You will be reunited. The upside down girl showed Harry the right side up. So on the way to school, Luna was reading the Quibbler upside down. On the way home, Ginny is doing a puzzle in the Quibbler, and she's holding it right side up, but to find the answers, she has to turn it upside down. The Order is waiting at King's Cross for them and deliver him to the Dursleys, making sure that they know that he has their support, and if he needs them, they will turn up. He will return to Privet Drive, knowing that nothing will ever be the same. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about that ring structure and make some connections since I've talked about how Book 3 and Book 5 are the connected books. So let's look at some of the things they have in common. In Book 3, Sirius arrives. In Book 5, he leaves. Book 3 introduces the Dementors. They're back in Book 5. There's a moon theme in Book 3 with Lupin, and Luna is introduced in Book 5, and her name is also associated with the moon. They both include prophecies. In Book 3, Harry gets the hope of living with Sirius, and in Book 5, he does for a while. They both deal with Harry's anger issues, with Draco in Book 3 and Umbridge in Book 5. In both books, someone insults Harry's mom, and he loses his temper. In Book 3, that was Aunt Marge. In Book 5, it is Draco. In Book 3, he saves Sirius. In Book 5, he loses him. In the Ministry is trying to find someone who has escaped them in both books. In Book 3, that's Sirius. In Book 5, it's Dumbledore. There's an escape from Azkaban in both books. Harry learns his real aptitude in defense against the dark arts in Book 3 and is the teacher for it in Book 5. The night bus shows up in both books. We learn about the Marauders more in both books. There is a hearing in both. Buckbeak's in Book 3, Harry's in Book 5. Harry was in trouble for underage magic for blowing up his aunt in Book 3, and Book 5 for the incident with the Dementors. That does show up as well in Book 2, but it was Dobby, not Harry, who performed it in that book. Harry flies to save Sirius on Buckbeak in Book 3, on the Thestral in Book 5. We see Boggarts in both books. Harry becomes interested in Cho in Book 3, and finally dates her and stops liking her in Book 5. In Book 3, Fudge puts Dementors at Hogwarts, a dangerous thing, to protect it. And in Book 5, he places Umbridge there. They're both soul suckers. They both deal with the concept of truth versus rumor. So I'm sure there's other ones that you can pick up on. Let me know in the comments if you have thought of any other connections the two books have that I didn't mention. The fifth obstacle in Book 1 was the troll, which was connected to the dark arts and defending yourself. That is a big theme in this book, obviously. We also see the hero's journey played out again in this book. I won't go through all of it. It's pretty much the same thing every single time. But if you study the hero's journey even with the other videos where I've talked about it, the whole entire 7-book series follows a hero's journey, and each book does as well. I said before this was going to be the last book I was going to do this year. I will be back next September with Back to Hogwarts Readathon again, and the videos for book 6 and book 7.